use the bathroom. What's up, guys? It's Shaky. Today, I made another build. I'll wait for applause. Anyways, it's a church build. I had a one-shot with some friends, and I wanted to introduce them to D&D with a bang. So I made this terrain build. It's a church with an outside portion of graveyard on it. It is abandoned, so I loved adding those aspects to make it seem more degraded into it. But I'm going to show you how I did it. Let's go! Before we start, I just want to say I did make 2 mini videos on this to go a little bit more in depth of different parts. If you haven't seen those already, you should, because they're cool, because I'm in it. Imagine that on my own channel. Anyways, it's the stone video and tree video. They're going to be somewhere here. Can put them somewhere here, please. Anyways, so you might hear some repeats. If you haven't watched it, you should go watch it after this. Anyways, let's start. Step 0. Step 0 is going to be reference photos and blueprints. This is essential for me for every single build that I make. I like to make little Pinterest boards and for my reference photos of all different aspects of what I could need. So for this one, I looked at just churches, old abandoned churches in general. I looked at gravestones. I look at just stonework, a whole bunch of stuff, and I just put a bunch in my Pinterest board, and I looked at this throughout the build. Now, blueprints are very important for me for the actual crafting part, because this is what's going to give me my dimensions. This is going to basically save me from going down an ADHD spiral and keep me on track. So those 2 things are going to save me multiple times throughout this process, and I will always come back to this. Even if you don't see it, just know. Just have a little note on the side. Just be like, everybody write on a Post-it note, Shaky has reference photos on the side. It's good to remember. Super important detail. Let's go to step 1. Step 1 is laying the foundation. So essentially just getting out your floor plan. For the cathedral, I just took 1-inch thick XPS foam that I got from Home Depot. I switched the first 2 letters. My local hardware store. And I just traced everything out that I would need. Measured twice, cut once. My dad always told me. Shout out, Dad. Anyways, I just traced that, and then I used my hot wire foam cutter to just cut that shape out. And then I didn't do it with this one, but I usually do this just to make it nicer. I just take sandpaper. I don't really care about the grit of it. I just use whatever I find first, to be honest. Maybe I should care, but I don't. And I just smooth out the edges to make it nice and cohesive. Like I said, I don't think I actually did that on this one, but if you wanted to look very nice, you should do that. But yeah, after laying the foundation, step number 2. Step 2 is the walls. So for this, by the way, again, if you haven't watched it, watch in depth my stones. Anyways, back to it. So for the stones, I made them the same size as how Dwarven Forge makes theirs for their walls, which is about 2 inches, maybe a little bit more high. And I measured that all out, and I got a stationary foam cutter. How nice is that? Cut them all off so they look nice and clean. And then I think they're clay and wood carving tools, but I use them for foam. No one needs to know. Anyway, I just started carving out the different shapes of stone and then pushing in between those lines to give depth. Rolled it over with a ball of tinfoil to add some nice texture. And then I pushed some stones down as well to kind of give that depth that a wall needs. I did that a lot, over and over. I didn't measure out the first time the exact amount I needed. So some of the paint looks a little bit different on them since I didn't write down the exact formula I did. So going forward, now I just know. Be a little bit better about measuring out and figuring out how much walls you need. I honestly, in the future, I might make just a little bit extra if there's something I didn't think about. After I cut everything out, I went with the 50% Mod Podge, 50% black paint that we love Blackcraft Magic for giving us. I went over with just dark gray paint, light gray paint, and then even a very light dry brushing of white on the top to let that texture pop. Step 3, the floor. So For this, I want to get really good at floors, but I haven't been able to do that yet. I tried it on the hellscape. I wasn't happy with this. This one I was sort of happy with. I think it could be better. So for the floors, I just took clay. I thinned it out using a rolling pin, and then I started cutting with I used a clay knife. You can probably use an X-Acto knife, whatever you have around, chef's knife, butcher knife, machete, whatever's just like, an arm's reach of you. Go ahead and use that. After that, I started just cutting off different shapes. I didn't want to worry too much about these being exactly the same shape because I just wanted to really give that mismatched look. I let those dry overnight and I tried to paint them a little bit darker than the stone walls. I didn't want it to all look too much the same, but I did start with the black Mod Podge mix. We love it. Then, just the same as the walls, I painted them gray, but I went with darker tones just because I wanted them to be a little bit different. Then I went ahead using hot glue and just one by one put them down, just gluing them, just shaping them differently. And I realized that this time I didn't have enough stones to actually cover the whole floor, so I decided to just make a little bit of a riser area with stairs and just kind of a little place that maybe people had given sermons at before. So I just put those in there using the same method for the walls as before, and that just filled up my space nicely. Step 4, the cemetery. This part, I just love outdoor scenes. So like this part, I just had so much fun with, especially because I just love autumn. It's my favorite season. What's not to like? First, what I did is I painted classic black layer first, and then I just went over with a dark brown to simulate dirt. Because then what I did, before I actually put down the grass as well, I put a line of glue and used just some gravel. I used these gray stones that I got at my local craft store, and I decided they looked perfect for the gravel. So I just sprayed where I wanted a path to be. I liked it being curved. I thought that looked nicer than it just being straight and linear. And I just sprinkled down the gravel on that as well. Then I was able to start on the grass. I started off with Mod Podge glue that you could spray, and then I would sprinkle this terrain grass that I got. I actually got 2 different types of terrain grass, and then I would just sprinkle that everywhere and mixed it together. I thought that gave it a really nice, seamless transition between the two. After getting the grass everywhere, I started making trees. Check out the video, please. Anyway, doing that, I just used floral wire. I wrapped it together and I covered that with aluminum foil and a thin layer of clay. Then I used a wire brush to create that nice texture. I went ahead and painted those again. First layer black, then I went with lighter and lighter shades of brown. Once those dried, I glued those just using hot glue down onto the terrain. I only wanted 2 here. I didn't want it to be too cluttered with the trees, make sure the gravestones that I would be later putting in had enough room to shine. After the trees then, I wanted to finish up all of the big things. So I went back to the cathedral. I kind of wanted to just finish off the cathedral, so we're going to step 5, the columns and the dirt. These were the kind of my finishing touches for the cathedral. So for the columns, I have these clay little cutout things that I used. I stacked 2 circles on top of each other, melded them together so you didn't see that line where they ripped. Then I once again took my ball of aluminum foil, ran it over it to give it kind of that stone texture again. Then I just created 2 stone cutouts, one a little bigger than the other to create the platform that the pillar would be standing on. I let that dry, and then once more I went over it with the stone look. So that first layer of black and then grays getting lighter and lighter with a dry brush of white to make that final texture again pop. For the ground, because the cathedral is abandoned, there are holes in the wall, and that means dirt got in. So I used a type of powder paint I cannot remember the name of right now that I combined with dry plaster, and together it formed a nice light dirt look. And I started just using tacky glue and a fine little metal tip. I put the tacky glue down and sprinkled down some dirt, and then also would use a paintbrush to kind of spread the dirt just naturally as well. I didn't want it everywhere, so I focused on where those holes were in the wall and where that dirt would start to form. Number 6 is the final touches. So for this, my favorite part was, again, going back outside. I used that spray glue again. I had these little terrain leaves that I sprinkled everywhere, but I concentrated it around where the trees were, since the trees no longer had their leaves on them. Everything had fallen. And then I went through and made gravestones using clay. Just a nice rectangle bottom and a round that worked perfectly. And then when I was painting them, I went through with light splashes of dark green, almost like moss had overgrown. I placed those down everywhere as well. Since I have skeletons rising from the graves to fight the players, I try to make sure they were pretty spaced out so I would have enough options for the skeletons to come out and fight. Then I had some doors left over from my Hellscape build. If you want to see that, I built a 3-tiered castle when my players went into hell. It was hell to make. And one day I'm going to redo it, and it's going to look a hell of a lot better. But right now I think it looks pretty cool. Anyways, I used those leftover doors that I had from Hellscape that I had 3D printed, and I just threw those into the doorway using toothpicks. Then I got this little bone skull from a craft store as well. I wanted to use a bone pillar mechanic that I had actually found from Wally DM. And I was going to be using that trap throughout. So I just put some dirt over that skeleton to give it kind of more of a melded look with everything else, and hot glued it right into the center of the cathedral. Also, to give it that kind of abandoned look, I went ahead and took a bunch of different types of moss. I didn't want it to just be one, and started hot gluing it wherever I thought it looked good. In particular, I tried to do it where the walls started to merge so that there wasn't that line. I could just make the moss cover it naturally. I had some going over it and into the cathedral just because I'm assuming some moss would probably grow in there as well. Maybe not as much as outside. And I just did that throughout the whole cathedral to really get the point across that this is an abandoned church. I keep saying cathedral, but it's a church. Again, I don't really know the difference. I know Cam in the stone video had looked it up. I already forgot it. Anyway, so yeah, I was really happy with how this turned out. I was so excited to present it to everyone. I knew that this one was kind of one of my cleaner builds that I had made, so I was really happy with how it turned out. The building wise, I was a lot happier with how the walls turned out rather than my Hellscape one, even though that looked cool. I think that this one just looks so much cleaner and nicer. If I had a little bit more time, this was something I probably could have done, but it would have been rushed. I wouldn't have necessarily been happy with it, but I would have made a roof for the cathedral since there was a mini fight outside, and then when they got in, I could take it off and they could see inside as well. That's something I'll probably try for a different build another time, but they were going to be fine. I just didn't put anything in the cathedral enemy-wise until they got in there. But that is something I want to explore, is making a cool-looking roof. So that was my church build, whatever you want to call it, my church graveyard build, whatever. I think it looks pretty cool. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you guys, again, have any tips for me, let me know. I'm always looking for more. If you have any suggestions on other builds I should try, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Shake it out! I'm so uncomfortable right now. Okay, before we start, I'm gonna try one more time.
What tea did you drink?
I just drank English tea.